Have you ever paused to think about how much of your energy is quietly being drained, not by others, but by you? How much of your strength, your mental clarity, and your inner power is being surrendered every time you give in to a fleeting urge? You might believe it's harmless, that it's just a moment of release, something natural. But the Stoics would look you in the eye and tell you, you're wasting your power. And not just power in the physical sense, but something far greater. The will to conquer your life. The energy to build, to lead, to transform. That energy doesn't just disappear, it is being redirected, lost in a cycle of instant gratification. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. That's the lesson. You're not weak for having desires. You're only weakened when you live by them. You see, the Stoics didn't view pleasure as evil. They saw ungoverned pleasure as a silent destroyer. They knew that the more a man gives in to the pursuit of pleasure, the more he forfeits his grip on reality, on purpose, and on self. Each time you engage in that habit, each time you trade your energy for a few seconds of stimulation, you're not simply experiencing relief, you're training your mind to obey impulse. And every act of obedience to impulse is an act of betrayal against discipline. The man who cannot say no to his own urges is a man who can be broken easily. He cannot endure discomfort. He cannot sit with silence. He cannot lead himself through the storm because he's only trained himself to seek shelter in pleasure. Stoicism is about facing that storm head-on. It's about understanding that the discomfort you avoid is the exact doorway to power. Seneca once said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." When you avoid the small battles, you remain unproven. You never sharpen your will, because you never test it. And what does masturbation do, truly? Beyond the surface gratification, it robs you of energy, of clarity, of fire. You walk through your day with less intensity, less urgency, less sharpness. Not because you're flawed, but because you've emptied the tank meant for greatness. That energy could have been turned into a business, a book, a stronger body, a deeper connection. But instead, it fades into nothing over and over, leaving behind a man more dulled with every release. This isn't superstition, it's physics. It's psychology. It's neurochemistry. And the Stoics may not have had scientific terms, but they saw the effects. They knew that the undisciplined life leads to quiet despair. The pleasure you seek has a price, and you pay it every day, not just with your time, but with your soul. You wonder why you feel unfocused, why your motivation has evaporated, why your passion fades so quickly. The answer lies in your rituals, the things you do when no one's watching, the moments where no applause exists, only choice. When you constantly release, you dilute yourself. You teach your mind that discipline is optional, that short-term relief is more important than long-term power. And you begin to lose your fire. Not in a dramatic explosion, but slowly, silently, like a flame without oxygen. The Stoic man does not reject pleasure out of shame. He does it because he values strength more than softness. Because he knows every moment of weakness, every time he surrenders to lust or comfort, he trains his mind to expect escape, when what he truly needs is endurance. Epictetus told his students to practice saying no, not because the world demanded it, but because the soul did. Because the path of a free man is marked by choices, not compulsions. And ask yourself this, what else are you saying yes to without thinking? Screens, noise, overeating, overstimulating. You numb yourself in the name of freedom, not realizing you're forging invisible chains with every unconscious act. Masturbation is just one of those chains. But it's one of the strongest, because it touches the root of your energy, the base of your drive. And when that is weakened, everything else cracks slowly. Stoics would ask, who owns your attention? Who controls your hands, your eyes, your desires? If it's not you, then who? Because a man who can't control his impulses can never control his destiny. But something happens when you stop. When you break the pattern, not through hate or shame, but through clarity. Through seeing the bigger picture. Through choosing to channel that energy into something more. That energy starts to build. You notice your mind is quieter. Your body is lighter. Your presence is sharper. You walk with more direction. You look people in the eye differently. You're no longer walking around as a man fragmented by desire, but as a man aligned with purpose. The urge doesn't disappear. But now you don't bow to it. You use it. You feel it rise, and instead of letting it rule you, you breathe and rise higher than it. That's Stoic alchemy. You become a man of edge. A man with a silent intensity. One who no longer seeks approval or escape because he has mastered the art of self-governance. And the world notices. Not because you boast, but because restraint radiates a kind of confidence that noise never can. You don't need to explain yourself. Your energy does it for you. This is the man who can fast when others feast. The man who can be calm in chaos. The man who can say no not to others, but to himself. He is dangerous. Not to others, but to weakness, distraction, mediocrity. Because he is not owned. Not by the body. Not by society. Not by fleeting emotion. He owns himself. You were not born to be ruled by an urge. You were not born to be depleted. You were not born to chase shadows on a screen, only to wake up empty. You were born to build, to command, to create, to live like a king, not like a beggar at the feet of temporary comfort. So the next time the urge hits you, pause. Breathe. Ask yourself, is this the man I want to be? Then choose. Choose discomfort over collapse. Choose power over pleasure. Choose restraint over release. Not because it's easy, but because it's right. The Stoics were right all along. The man who masters his desires becomes unbreakable. Because once you stop wasting your power, you start becoming unstoppable. When you choose not to give in to your impulses, something powerful happens that most men never experience. You begin to feel your strength returning. It doesn't happen with noise or fanfare. It's silent, subtle, almost invisible at first. But one morning, you'll wake up, and your thoughts will feel more organized. Your body will feel more grounded. You'll walk into a room and people will sense a change even if they can't describe it. That's the power you've been wasting all along. You've taken it for granted. Flushed it away like it didn't matter. But it does matter. Because your energy is sacred. And the Stoics knew, when you lose reverence for your own energy, you begin living beneath your potential. Marcus Aurelius didn't need the internet to understand this. He governed an empire, yet he still found time to write to himself daily, reminding himself to resist distraction, temptation, and luxury. He wrote, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind. Your soul takes on the color of your thoughts." Now ask yourself, what are your thoughts colored with? What are you feeding your mind with? What do you turn to when you feel empty? Is it the scroll? The escape? The screen? Or is it solitude? Discipline? Silence? The answers to those questions will define the man you become 5 years from now, 10 years from now. The Stoics believed that the man who does not waste his energy on things he cannot control becomes invincible. And you can control your habits. You can control what you feed yourself, what you give your attention to, what you give your body to. When you stop masturbating, not because of shame, but because of clarity, you begin to rewrite your internal code. You're not repressing, you're refining. Because what you resist, you train. Your mind becomes less reactionary. Your mood becomes more stable. You start to feel like you again, or maybe for the first time ever. This is not about perfection. You'll still feel desire. You'll still be tested. But now you'll recognize the urge for what it is: a shadow, a wave, a passing cloud, not something you must bow to. And over time, you'll stop chasing women. You'll stop fantasizing. You'll stop needing external validation. Because you've internalized a deeper truth. You are enough when you master yourself. Not when you get the girl. Not when you reach for your phone. Not when you run from your emotions into a screen. You are enough the moment you decide to be sovereign over your own flesh. And there's a spiritual dimension here too. When you contain your energy, when you refuse to spill it on meaningless things, your intuition sharpens. Your sensitivity to life deepens. Your presence becomes magnetic. The ancients didn't need studies to understand this. They felt it. And so can you. Energy, when held and redirected, becomes vision. It becomes clarity. It becomes leadership. It's not an accident that men throughout history who have done the impossible, philosophers, warriors, prophets, inventors, practiced restraint. They didn't see it as restriction. They saw it as preparation. Because when your energy isn't scattered, it focuses like a laser. And a focused man can build mountains while others are still trapped in the maze of indulgence. The Stoic man doesn't suppress who he is. He disciplines it. He doesn't fear his desire. He channels it. Every drop of energy you withhold from waste is stored in the reservoir of power. For creativity. For vision. For strength. For patience. And when the time is right for love. True, powerful, sacred connection. Not fake, digital, lifeless interaction. Until then, you wait. You build. You sharpen. You remain calm, not because you're cold, but because you're in control. In the words of Marcus Aurelius, you must build up your life action by action, and be content if each one achieves its goal as far as possible, and no one can keep you from this. No one can stop you from mastering yourself. But you can stop yourself every time you surrender your energy. And so the choice returns, again and again, day by day, urge by urge. Will you waste your power, or will you rise? Will you live like the millions who distract themselves to death, or like the few who channel every drop of their strength into greatness? This isn't about becoming someone else. It's about returning to the man you were before the world weakened you, before the urges ruled you, before your power slipped through your fingers, drop by drop. Now you know. Now you can see it clearly. So what will you do? Will you close this video and go back to your cycle? Or will you pause, breathe, and begin again, this time as the master? You have nothing to prove to anyone, but everything to prove to yourself. Your future is watching. Your woman is watching, even if you haven't met her yet. Your destiny is waiting. And it doesn't wait for the man who indulges. It waits for the man who withholds, so that he may one day unleash. Strong, stoic, unbreakable. You are that man if you choose to be. The moment you stop wasting your energy, something ancient reawakens within you. It's not loud. It doesn't announce itself with noise. But suddenly, you begin to feel like a man again. Your thoughts become clearer. You stop rushing. You stop reacting. You start walking slower, more grounded. You look people in the eye longer, more certain. Not because you're pretending to be confident, but because your nervous system is no longer drowning in overstimulation. The man who no longer chases pleasure has a stillness that others notice. You walk into a room, and something about your presence says, "This man doesn't chase. He doesn't beg. He doesn't need your approval. He belongs to himself." The Stoics weren't just philosophers, they were warriors of the mind. They lived in empires built on violence, temptation, corruption. And yet, they kept a simple code. Don't waste what you can never get back. That includes time. That includes energy. That includes your sexual essence, the very force that fuels action, creation, aggression, focus, dominance. In the modern world, we've been taught to spill it casually, to laugh about it, to mock the idea of retaining it. We've been tricked into thinking our power is disposable. But that power is the reason you feel depressed when you waste it. The reason you lose drive. The reason you feel empty after giving in. You didn't just release pleasure, you released purpose. And no screen, no fantasy, no temporary thrill will ever replace the quiet knowing that you are becoming more each day, not less. When you stop releasing, your goals come back into focus. You stop talking yourself out of what you were born to do. That book you said you'd write? That business you've been dreaming about? That body you want to build? That discipline you keep postponing? Suddenly, all of it returns to the front of your mind. Not because someone told you to do it, but because your natural masculine hunger is no longer being numbed. You're no longer pacified by pleasure. You're agitated by purpose. And that agitation, that restless energy, that is the birthplace of transformation. It's what Marcus Aurelius meant when he said, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work, as a human being. Not as an addict, not as a slave to cravings, but as a human, awake, responsible, devoted to excellence." Because when you no longer run from discomfort, you start to crave mastery. You don't want the easy hit. You want the hard-earned win. The quiet satisfaction that comes not from giving in, but from rising above. And when you string together days, weeks, months of discipline, your whole reality begins to shift. You begin to see what others can't. You begin to attract what others chase. You begin to build what others merely fantasize about. Not because you're lucky, but because you're in control. Discipline creates gravity. People feel it. Your presence becomes a mirror. They see in you what they've buried in themselves. And they're drawn to it. Respect it. Fear it. But you? You don't need to impress them. Because you already won the war inside. The war between comfort and greatness. The war between compulsion and creation. The war between who you are and who you were born to become. This isn't just about quitting a habit. This is about awakening your potential. You think clearer. Speak less. Mean more. You stop explaining yourself because your actions become enough. You stop reacting emotionally because you've stabilized your nervous system. You stop seeking comfort because you understand that discomfort is where growth happens. And you stop fearing loneliness because solitude becomes your training ground. The same solitude the Stoics sat in, where they faced themselves, sharpened their minds, and emerged with clarity. They didn't scroll. They didn't escape. They sat. They reflected. And they returned stronger. That's what you're doing now. Every moment you resist the urge, you're forging a version of yourself that cannot be seduced by weakness. A version of yourself that can sit with pain, with boredom, with frustration and still stay grounded. Because you now understand what most people never will. Your ability to delay pleasure is your pathway to power. No one teaches you this anymore. Because the world profits from your addiction. The more you consume, the more you spend. The more you release, the more you crave. The more you crave, the more distracted you become. But you're breaking the cycle. You're returning to your natural design. You're no longer letting yourself be drained by fantasy. Because the real thing you're chasing was never the pleasure. It was power. your power. And now, you're taking it back moment by moment, breath by breath, choice by choice. Every time you resist, remember, you are not losing something. You are gaining yourself. You're not depriving yourself. You're remembering who you were before the world weakened you, before they trained you to obey the urge, before you believed you were powerless to control your body. Now you know better. Now you choose better. And the more you choose discipline, the more the man within you rises strong, calm, unshakable. He doesn't chase. He doesn't collapse. He doesn't beg. He builds. He embodies. He becomes. Because he no longer wastes his power. He masters it. You'll start to notice something strange. As the days of discipline build, you begin to see the world differently. You're no longer pulled by it. You're observing it. Where others are agitated, you're calm. Where others are distracted, you're focused. Where others chase pleasure, you pursue purpose. The noise that used to trigger you, it fades. The content that used to seduce you, it becomes laughable. Not because you've become emotionless, but because you've built inner gravity. The Stoics didn't numb themselves, they trained themselves. They understood something profound. The world outside is chaos. The world inside is a temple. And if your temple is weak, the noise will own you. Every time you indulge in the easy escape, you chip away at that temple. Every time you resist, you reinforce it. This is no longer about quitting a habit. This is about identity. You are becoming a man who chooses himself. Not the urge, not the fantasy, not the quick hit, but the deep, slow fire of presence. And that fire, it doesn't explode. It doesn't announce itself. It builds quietly, day by day, action by action, until one day you'll catch yourself in the mirror, and something about your reflection will stop you. You won't quite recognize yourself, because the boy who used to chase pleasure is gone. What remains is a man carved by restraint, sharpened by solitude, anchored in purpose. No longer asking the world for permission. No longer escaping from life but facing it, fully awake. That's what happens when you stop wasting your power. You begin to attract challenges instead of avoiding them. You crave discomfort instead of fearing it. You no longer run to screens, to validation, to release. You sit with the urge and let it pass. You become a mountain, not a wave. Still, grounded, unmoving. And it's in that stillness that your true self emerges, the man who was always there, buried under layers of distraction and noise. The man who doesn't fold under pressure. Who doesn't need to explain himself. Who doesn't need another hit to feel alive. Because he is alive. Fully. Deeply. Silently. And when you show up like that in the world, people notice. Not because of how loud you are, but because of how little you need. That's power. True power. Not dominance over others, but over yourself. Your mind. Your body. Your choices. That's the Stoic path. The path of the philosopher-warrior. And every man who walks it must pass through the same gate, the gate of self-control. Because there is no freedom without discipline. There is no wisdom without restraint. There is no greatness without sacrifice. So if you've stumbled, get up. If you've failed, start again. If the urge feels overwhelming, breathe. You're not supposed to be perfect. You're supposed to be present. And in presence, you regain your command. The ancient Stoics never promised an easy life. But they promised something better, a life lived on your terms, built on your values, ruled by your reason. A life where every action is a reflection of who you truly are, not who the algorithm wants you to be. And that life begins the moment you stop giving yourself away. You're not missing out by withholding pleasure. You're missing out by surrendering your potential for it. Because behind that urge isn't satisfaction. It's distraction, delay, denial of your own greatness. You know this. You've felt it. And that means the fire has already begun inside you. Now you feed it. Not with shame. Not with guilt. But with silence. Discipline. Consistency. And each time you choose discipline, you choose your future. A stronger voice. A sharper mind. A clearer path. A calmer presence. This is the reward the Stoics understood, the reward that's never loud, never fast, never instant, but always lasting. You no longer waste your power, because now you understand what it's for. Not for momentary release, but for eternal rise. The man who wastes his power becomes a shadow of his potential. Not because life is unfair, but because he gives away his strength to distractions that offer nothing in return. The Stoics didn't live in a world of constant stimulation like ours, but their wisdom still pierces through the noise. Marcus Aurelius warned against being tied to pleasure as if it were a leash. Why? Because pleasure, when uncontrolled, leads to weakness, and weakness invites regret. When you fall into habitual pleasure-seeking, you trade your edge for temporary comfort. That edge is what makes you sharp, focused, dangerous, in the best sense of the word. The Stoic man doesn't chase dopamine. He channels discipline. His life is not dictated by urges, but by intention. He doesn't reach for escape. He reaches for mastery. Most men don't realize they are handing over their energy until it's already depleted. After they've drained themselves, they wonder why they feel empty. But it's not mystery. It's mathematics. Every act of undisciplined pleasure leaves you with less clarity, less fire, less forward motion. The body follows the mind. When your mind is trained, your body becomes aligned. But if your mind is a servant to cravings, your body becomes lazy, impulsive, and soft. That's what the Stoics feared, not external threats, but internal erosion. The silent decline of strength due to unnoticed habits. Ask yourself, how would your life look if you reclaimed every moment you've spent chasing low pleasures? What could you have built with that time, that energy, that clarity? Seneca wrote that we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. And that's true. But when you constantly give in to the imagination of pleasure, you start to believe it defines your limits. That's the trap. The Stoic man rises above urges not by denying he has them, but by mastering them. He observes the craving, recognizes it, and moves through it. Not because he's numb, but because he is awake, fully conscious of what it costs to indulge and what it rewards to resist. It's not about shaming yourself. Stoicism doesn't encourage guilt, it encourages growth. If you've been wasting your energy on pleasure, you're not broken. You're just misdirected. And the good news? You can change direction. Today. Right now. The next time that urge hits, pause. Take a breath. Don't fight it with panic. Watch it. Study it. See it for what it is, a test, not a threat. And then, calmly, let it pass. Like a wave that cannot drown you unless you chase it. This is what Stoics understood. That the real war is internal. The battle is for your focus, your energy, your presence. Every time you master a craving, you sharpen your sword. Every time you delay gratification, you earn power. Silent power. The kind that builds empires, moves mountains, and demands respect, without speaking a word. So when you feel the pull to waste your power again, remember this, that energy is your life force. It's your divine engine. Don't throw it away for a flicker of pleasure that leaves you weaker. Guard it like a king protects his crown. Because once you stop wasting your power, the world can no longer ignore your presence. You won't need validation. You'll radiate discipline. and that is the most attractive force a man can wield. Do you know what happens when you stop chasing the urge? You begin to lead your life, instead of following your impulses. You move with calm intention. You become aware of how many people are still prisoners to their compulsions. You start seeing clearly, thinking clearly, acting with precision. Your energy is no longer fragmented, it's focused. It's collected. It's lethal, in a quiet, effective way. The world doesn't reward the distracted. It rewards the deliberate, the disciplined. The man who can master his appetites can master his future. And Stoicism gives you the tools to do exactly that. Not by shouting, not by resisting with white knuckles, but by understanding, detaching, and moving forward with composure. And the greatest reward? You start trusting yourself again. You no longer fear your own mind. You become a man who keeps promises to himself. That's what the Stoics lived for, not glory, not status, not perfection, but internal alignment. Power that isn't loud, but unshakable. You are not here to be ruled by urges. You are here to rule yourself. Every urge you conquer becomes a brick in the fortress of your willpower. Build it, brick by brick, quietly, relentlessly, like a true Stoic. When you learn to withhold your energy, when you choose not to waste it on temporary pleasures, you realize how much more alive and in control you feel. The clarity that arises from abstaining is not just mental, it's spiritual. It's a reclaiming of your essence. This is what the Stoics deeply understood. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "A man's worth is no greater than the worth of his ambitions." Ask yourself, what do you truly aim for? Pleasure or power? Distraction or direction? The more you give in to base desires, the less mental bandwidth you have to dedicate to your goals. It's not just the act itself, it's the ripple effect it creates. Every time you indulge impulsively, you teach your mind that comfort comes before purpose. That gratification is more important than growth. You set yourself up for mediocrity. But when you pause, when you resist the urge, you gain time, energy, and dignity. You stop chasing, and instead begin creating. You begin to build something of substance, within and around you. Seneca warned, "No man is free who is a slave to his passions." A man ruled by urges is not free. He's bound by invisible chains, chains he fastens on himself each time he chooses fleeting comfort over long-term mastery. But here's the truth few will tell you. The urges don't disappear overnight. The temptation lingers. And that's okay. Because your job is not to become superhuman. Your job is to become sovereign over yourself. To become disciplined in the storm. To say, "I see the temptation, but I choose myself instead." And when you do this, over and over again, your life begins to change in ways you can't imagine. You'll notice your thoughts become clearer. Your voice becomes firmer. Your presence becomes more grounded. Others start to sense something different about you. Because self-control radiates power. It speaks before you speak. It walks before you walk. You become the man who doesn't need to chase because he knows his worth. You become the man who's calm, not because life is easy, but because he has built internal order. The Stoics didn't teach abstinence just to restrict pleasure. They taught it because it reveals strength. Because in abstaining, you become the master of your world, not its victim. Imagine waking up with purpose, instead of shame. Walking into the world with energy, instead of exhaustion. Facing people with clarity, not confusion. That's the life waiting for you beyond compulsive habits. And you don't need to announce it to the world. This journey is silent, private, noble. It's not about being better than others. It's about becoming who you were meant to be, before all the noise distracted you. In those moments of struggle, remind yourself, you're not rejecting pleasure. You're choosing purpose. You're not denying yourself, you're discovering yourself. The world is full of men who've lost their power because they've lost their discipline. Don't be one of them. Be the man who stands apart. Be the man who is in control. Be the man the Stoics would admire, not because you're perfect, but because you strive. So next time the urge rises, pause. Breathe. Feel it, but don't feed it. Reclaim your energy. Reclaim your power. Because once you stop wasting your power, you'll begin to realize you never needed pleasure to feel alive. What you needed was presence, direction, and the courage to be fully in control. That is where your true power lives. And it's in that self-directed discipline where true peace begins. Not the peace that comes from silence around you, but the silence within. The kind of silence where your thoughts are no longer chaotic. Where your emotions don't control you like wild winds. Where temptation knocks, but you don't answer, because you've already chosen something greater. Let's go deeper. Every time you delay gratification, whether it's scrolling social media, indulging in toxic relationships, overeating, or wasting your evenings, you're building a reserve of energy. This stored power doesn't just disappear, it amplifies your focus, your magnetism, your masculinity. You begin to radiate something rare, something unexplainable. The Stoics didn't fast from pleasure just to appear strong. They did it to build resilience, to condition themselves not to be slaves to the external world, to be free. Modern society teaches us the opposite, that more is better, that constant consumption is happiness. But look around. How many people are truly fulfilled? How many people are mentally present? Few. Very few. Because they've scattered themselves into 1,000 pieces. But not you. You've chosen a different path. You've chosen restraint over reaction. You've chosen delayed rewards over instant fixes. You've chosen to rebuild your relationship with your own mind. And here's the secret. The man who can sit still, breathe deeply, and not react is the man who becomes unshakable. Your urges want you to act now. But Stoicism teaches you to slow down, to see the full picture, to ask, is this action aligned with the man I want to become? And if the answer is no, you don't move. You don't chase. You don't give in. You breathe, and you return to center. Because giving in is easy. Anyone can do it. But self-control? That's divine. That's warrior energy. That's king energy. It's how you separate yourself from the masses. And let's be clear, this isn't about perfection. You will slip. You will falter. But every time you fall and stand up again, you become sharper, stronger, wiser. Because mastery isn't about never falling. It's about falling forward, with intention. Think about the old Roman generals, the great philosophers, the Stoic kings of history. They were not admired because they shouted their strength. They were admired because they lived it. Quietly, consistently, unapologetically. They were feared not because they raised their voice, but because they didn't have to. That's what self-control creates. An aura, a presence, a magnetic silence. You walk into a room and people feel it. They don't know why, but they respect it. You don't seek validation, because your validation comes from within. You don't follow trends, because you're anchored to timeless principles. You become rare. You become unforgettable. Why? Because most men today are out of control. Chasing. Consuming. Distracted. But you're focused. Intentional. And that difference becomes your greatest advantage. Let others waste their power. You'll conserve yours. Let others lose themselves in temporary highs. You'll rise through lasting discipline. Let others be ruled by their emotions. You'll command yours, and in doing so, command your life. This is not just Stoicism. This is evolution. This is transcendence. When you stop reacting, you start choosing. When you stop chasing, you start attracting. When you stop pleasing, you start leading. And that, my friend, is where everything changes. Because the man who can say no to distractions, to addictions, to the easy path, is the man the world quietly obeys. So guard your power. Don't waste it. Channel it. You're not here to live on your knees to temptation. You're here to rise. Rise with intention. Rise with discipline. Rise with quiet, relentless self-control. The Stoics knew this. Now you do too. And now you must live it.